Hello, and welcome to Boots to Reboots, the place where most remakes come to die. This week I plan on taking a look back on a film that I kinda forgot about. A film that possibly other people forget about too because I never hear or see much about it ever. What movie am I talking about? The remake of Mighty Joe Young, starring Charlize Theron and Bill Paxton. Now, before I was sent to the hospital, this was a film that I actually remember seeing in theaters. The same theater, in fact, that I later worked at, and then got fired from after my outburst.
Sons of bitches.
When I was released not too long ago and horrified by all my favorite movies being remade, I set out to tackle the remake issue from beginning to present day. An outlet for me to vent my frustrations. Otherwise I'd probably go insane.
Andy, but you're insane.
Shut the fuck up. Let's start the movie. Charlize Theron plays Jill Young, who is the daughter of Ruth Young, a guerrilla researcher. I'm not for sure, but I like to think the name came from Ruth Rose, the writer of the original. Also, Ruth Young kind of reminds me of Jane Goodall mixed with the tragedy of another leaky angel, Diane Fossey. She was an American zoologist who was very vocal about gorilla poaching and was mysteriously found murdered. So young Jill and Mommy Ruth research gorillas and get caught up in a poacher's raid.
Gorilla. Fresh.
My underwear not so fresh.
In the raid, both Jill and Joe's mothers are tragically murdered.
What if you shot the woman? We should help her.
No! Let's get out of here!
Yeah, but that looks bad.
Yeah, screw that lady you shot and is now bleeding to death. That finger looks pretty gross. The murderous poachers are led by a guy named Andre Strasser.
There is only one thing you should be afraid of on this mountain, and it's staring you right in the face.
No, it's too fucking dark to see anything.
You might have seen him recently as the guy Liam Neeson kills in Taken 2. During the struggle, he has his thumb and trigger finger bitten off by Joe. Our villain then swears to get his revenge for the handicap. In a very emotional scene while Ruth is dying, she tells her daughter to look after Joe now that they are both orphans. Already the story is different from the original. In the original, some African dudes walk by carrying an ape. Jill gets excited when she sees it and wants to purchase him.
Oh, will you sell it?
Her father is gone, so she starts grabbing shit that doesn't belong to her, like jewelry and a flashlight, to make a trade for Joe.
Listen, kid, you're gonna buy him because we late for a basketball game.
I like how she starts off small at first, with just the 3 coins. What a little hustler, and you can see it in her face.
Here, look, very nice.
And why does she speak out loud to herself? She comes off as bipolar because she thinks one way, but then acts another.
Oh, I'm being very bad. It isn't mine.
Stop Gunnar!
Okay, alright. Oh, Diddy, it's all mine!
She started to creep me out after a while. So father finds the ape and swears up and down that they are not keeping him. So of course they end up keeping him. Well, we find out Jill's mother is dead, so the ape kind of fills the void in the little girl's life.
Listen, Jill. When he grows up, he'll be dangerous.
God, she's fucking creepy.
This is when the original skips ahead 12 years. Jill and Joe are grown up and her father has been dead for 6 months. She now runs her father's farm on her own. In the remake, 12 years later, and Jill is a local gal who fights off poachers.
Maybe you dropped it and might want it back!
There is no father character or farm in this version. Joe is the only thing she has and he is constantly in danger. In comes Bill Paxton's character Greg O'Hara, who is a combination of 2 characters from the original. In the original, there was the Oklahoma cowboy Greg, who Jill falls in love with, and the wealthy nightclub owner Mr. O'Hara. Since Mighty Joe Young is sort of a spin-off of King Kong, the story pretty much follows the same pattern. Mr. O'Hara is starting an African-themed nightclub and he needs a big attraction. He convinces Jill to leave her farm and take Joe to LA. Joe is put on display, freaks out, escapes, destroys stuff, yada 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 yada. In the remake, I'm perfectly fine with them combining the two characters because Greg the Cowboy was pointless. He didn't do or say much and was just there to be Jill's weak thrown-in love interest. So is this new Greg O'Hara a nightclub owner?
Why would I want to do that?
Nope, he's studying animals in Africa.
Put the cat down now.
So O'Hara meets up with the
Arab or Persian guy. He's gotta be Persian, right?
Anyway, he supplies O'Hara with equipment and men to take on his expedition. The men trap a leopard and O'Hara takes a blood sample. The little kitty cries out and something's going on with the trees, man. Well, unlike King Kong where you have to wait forever to see the giant ape, Joe makes his giant appearance exactly 15 minutes into the movie. And there's an interesting contrast here between the two movies. In this version, Joe frees the leopard because he's against harm coming to any animals. In the original, Joe sees a lion in a cage and starts fucking with it and beats it up. Hell, later in the movie he goes on a lion-killing rampage.
He has a taste for blood.
O'Hara is amazed by Joe and wants to get closer for a blood sample.
Real close!
The men chase after him and get knocked all around.
They live. Bet you provide a great health plan!
Yeah, but their vision and dental is shit. So O'Hara's men don't want to go any further.
I saw the intelligence! You almost took my head off!
And then what would I be? I'd look like a mannequin displaying jogging suits. So O'Hara gets cornered by Joe, but is saved by a beautiful woman. When he wakes up, he wants to know more about her.
Like what she looks like naked.
Weak. And once he discovers Jill and Joe's problem, he offers to take Joe to a preserve in LA. There he won't have to worry about being hunted. A nice change from the original, which is basically retelling King Kong but with a happy ending. O'Hara's intentions in the original were based around greed and wealth, while in the remake O'Hara decides to take Joe to LA for his protection.
It's gonna be tough trying to protect him here, maybe impossible.
At the preserve, we are introduced to the staff. There's Harry Rubin, the director.
He's so full of shit he attracts flies.
Come here, Joe!
And the character Cecily Banks, who's only there because Whoopi Goldberg was busy. Whoopi! It does take some time for the other members of the preserve to warm up to Joe. They're terrified at first.
As they should be.
Especially the director, Harry Rubin, who at first comes off as a weaselly dork. In one scene where Harry is showing the chairman Joe's exhibit, he goes in and gets cornered by Joe. He's about ready to piss himself when Jill comes to the rescue. Turns out Joe is just playing an innocent game of hide and seek with Harry.
You found me!
The chairman is impressed with Jill's ability to understand Joe and hires her to be in charge of the great ape.
Put her on the payroll, Harry. Okay.
Everything seems to be going well.
Meanwhile, in his evil lair, our villain is watching the news when he recognizes Jill as Ruth Young's daughter. He also realizes that Joe is the little ape that bit off his fingers, and he wants to sell Joe's body parts on the black market. The villain and his henchman, Garth...
Can I still be Garth?
...fly to LA to extract their revenge. Garth sneaks off during a tour and finds Joe's exhibit. He takes out his poacher's noisemaker and Joe quickly realizes who Garth is. Joe gets pissed and starts tearing that place up.
Is this what my life has come to?
Meanwhile, Jill and Greg are on a date. Even though it's not the greatest, it's nice that the remake takes time to establish a connection between these two. In the original, 17 weeks fly by and all of a sudden the cowboy and Jill love each other for no real reason. We didn't see the chemistry like we do here. It was just out of the blue. Hey, we love each other. Yippee-yi-yi, cowboy. Instead, we see Jill and Greg not get along at first, but he soon wins her over.
What's it like?
What, sex? It's something easier to show than to explain.
And then you find yourself saying things. Lots of things.
What kind of things?
I want to bone you in a cage and make Joe watch.
Huh, what is it?
What is it? Did you feel my erection? Greg's about to get some action when Jill is paged about Joe's freakout.
But I wanted to see them do it.
The next day, Jill tries to convince the chairman to delay the benefit because Joe is bummed out. The chairman blows her off and Jill is upset that he won't even consider it. As soon as she steps outside, Jill runs into our villain. He tells her that he knew her mother and that he has a 20,000-acre preserve where Joe would be happier, that he'd be able to run free and have no worries. Jill is tempted and wants to talk more about it at the event. Skip ahead to that night and Jill walks in looking like a goddess. Hubba hubba.
Harry, you're dripping again.
Oh my god.
Wow, she's beautiful.
She reminds me of somebody, but I can't think who it is.
You when we first met.
Here's some trivia for you. That actress is Terry Moore, who played Jill in the original movie, and Ray Harryhausen, who did most of the stop-motion effects for that film. A nice little nod to the fans. But back to the plot. During the event, the villains sneak off and anger Joe some more. Kind of like the drunken jerks in the original film, but different, like a good remake should do. Back inside, people are starting to get nervous. Oh my god. Back inside, and people are starting to get nervous over the commotion that Joe is making. Ah crap, here comes another movie cliche. Whenever there's a big event or meeting with an investor over an animal or experiment, you can guarantee that something wrong is going to happen. Kong and Joe are old examples, and more recent ones include movies like Splice and The Rise of the Planet of the Apes. With Joe now on the rampage, O'Hara makes for the trank gun while Jill runs over to try and calm him down.
He's out of control. I'm going for the trank gun.
No, Greg!
The chairman accidentally gets shot instead, and things aren't looking good. Joe fights his way towards the bad guys, but is put to sleep before he has his revenge. So 3 lawsuits and 12 injured people later, Joe is now viewed as a menace and probably going to be put down. Again, this is different from the original, but in a good way. In the original, Joe is taken to the nightclub as the main attraction. He's a performing monkey for the audience. 10 weeks fly by and Jill is having second thoughts. She wants to take Joe back to Africa where he can be free. O'Hara says okay, but give me time to find a replacement act. Well, 7 weeks fly by and Jill and Joe are still there, but now performing even more humiliating acts. In one scene, the guests are ordered to throw giant coins at Joe, and if he picks up your coin, you get some free drinks. This upsets Joe, and the show ends early. While down in his cage, some drunks antagonize Joe with booze. They want to give the monkey a drink. And then they burn him. Joe gets pissed and breaks out. He tears up the nightclub and kills a lion. Okay, a couple lions. Shit, he's up for lion blood. After his outburst, it is decided that Joe will be put to sleep.
I'm very sorry, Miss Young, but he must be shot.
O'Hara, who's been a dick so far, realizes bringing Joe there was a mistake and wants to help Jill get him back to Africa. A nice change of heart.
If Joe gets shot, it's my fault. You and Joe don't belong here. I taught you into this, and it's up to me to get you out.
He comes up with this plan to fool the cops long enough for Jill and the cowboy to rescue Joe. In the remake, Harry and Cecily help Jill and Greg bust out Joe. A guard almost stops them, but Jill says fuck that noise and shoots him. Things look good until, whoa, the villain is driving the truck. So Jill loads up Joe and hops in with the bad guys. Meanwhile, some other employees are looking through the lost and found box from the party. Greg recognizes the noisemaker used by poachers and realizes who Jill and Joe just drove off with. He quickly gets in his vehicle and chases them down. Meanwhile, in the truck, Jill gets suspicious of the homeless guy from Batman Begins.
It's a nice
She looks down at his missing fingers and realizes he is the motherfucking mother murderer. O'Hara catches up and Jill jumps out of the truck. Joe breaks out in epic fashion and crushes some tough guy now turned pussy's car.
What? Come on, nobody's seen an accident? What?
Jill hops in O'Hara's car and wouldn't you know it, they get stuck in LA traffic.
Get out of the way! Get out of the way!
So Joe makes his way around some iconic locations in LA, such as the Chinese Theater. We learn that he hates car alarms as much as the next person. He picks up some bitches, and then tries to catch a movie.
He's gonna get all tuckered out.
Well, Joe gets denied a ticket and climbs up the building. Luckily, no planes shoot him down and he's able to disappear. However, our villains aren't done yet. They steal some poor guy's car and continue their hunt.
Fifth time this year. Hey!
Meanwhile, Joe is making his way towards a carnival because he thinks he sees Jill's flashlight calling him. I like how they took something small and insignificant like the flashlight in the original and made it mean something here. The flashlight symbolizes protection for Joe. Jill and O'Hara are trying to figure out where the big guy's going when Jill also spots the spotlight and knows that's where Joe will go.
Excuse me, sir, you must be this short to ride the rides.
Joe finally gets to the carnival and begins looking for Jill, but can't find her anywhere. But soon Jill arrives and catches up. Our villain takes aim and intends to shoot Jill, but his goon Garth hunts animals. He doesn't kill people. So Garth has a change of heart and causes Grigorovich to miss.
Yeah, woo, 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 yeah, woo, woo, yeah.
Well, the bullet accidentally starts a fire, and soon the entire carnival is an inferno. In the original, Jill, Joe, and the cowboy are trying to lose the cops until they come across an orphanage that is on fire. That's right, an orphanage that is on fire. That's kinda random. So they pull over and help rescue the children from inside.
Orphans go up in flames pretty quickly. I should know.
Well, they think they've rescued all the children, but no. There's one more still on the roof. Cowboy Greg can't get back up, so it's up to old Joe to save the little girl. He climbs up, grabs her, but on the way down is surrounded by flames. He has nowhere to go but back up. Soon the entire tree comes crashing down, but they are saved at the last second.
Why does she keep falling down?
She almost dies again, but Joe jumps in the way and the building falls on him. Is he dead? Nope. He survives, and because of his heroics, they decide not to put him down.
There's nobody in the world gonna shoot Joe now.
In the remake, the orphanage is replaced with a Ferris wheel. The cops are ready to shoot Joe until they discover a child is stuck at the top of the ride. It's now up to Joe to climb up and save him. He grabs the child, the wheel begins to collapse, and Joe takes the full force of the fall. The boy is safe, but it looks like Joe may be down for the count. It's actually really sad.
Oh, come on, it's obvious he's not going to die. The Disney movie.
Well, you're right, because just when you want to cry like a girl, Joe wakes up.
You big palooka! That's no way to ride a Ferris wheel.
Did everyone forget about that guy who got fully engulfed in flames? Is he gonna be okay? Well, the main question is, what will they do with Joe now that he's a hero and they won't kill him? Well, everybody decides to donate money to create a home for Joe. Back in Africa, Jill and O'Hara are able to buy enough land for Joe to roam carefree. So Joe lives. The villain dies. And Joe is safe for the rest of his life. A typical happy ending. In the original, Joe's life is spared and he goes back to Africa with Greg and Jill to live on the farm. Joe's situation is better than what it was in LA, but isn't any better than before they went to LA. Now that he's famous, people could still try to mess with and possibly hunt him. There's really no growth because they just end up right where they left off. While both films have typical Hollywood happy endings, the original is more forced. Because let's face it, all it was is a remake of King Kong but with a more kid-friendly ending. The whole purpose of the film was for it to end on a nicer note than King Kong. The original isn't a bad movie, and the stop-motion effects are a little bit better than what they were in King Kong, but the story just kinda goes through the motions. The human characters really don't work in the movie, and that's because the conflict is ape versus man. Whether it's Mr. O'Hara at first, or the nightclub guests, or the police, Greg has nothing going on in the film, and Jill is okay. The little girl who played young Jill, on the other hand, is fucking terrifying. Ugh. The characters in the remake, however, have a little bit more going on. There's a distinct villain this time, and Jill has a lot stronger backstory. It makes her and Joe's relationship stronger in the remake. The supporting cast in the remake, however, is kinda bleh. Charlize Theron and Bill Paxton save it though with their performances. But let's look at the true star of the film, Mighty Joe Young. In the original, the design of Joe is a little more realistic than King Kong. And there's a lot of scenes that blend stop motion and live action together pretty seamlessly. There are a couple instances where you see the wires or the rods holding the figures in place, but it's kinda expected. The most distracting thing was the ending of the movie. In the end, O'Hara gets a film reel in the mail of our main character's happy back in Africa. Jill throws Joe a banana and it clearly goes over his head even though he catches it. Or when Greg is climbing down the orphanage. The effects look cheap and are distracting, almost as if towards the end of the movie they started to get tired. Overall though, the stop motion is pretty good and the film won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. Now let's look at Joe in the remake. He looks like a realistic giant gorilla. It's pretty flawless and looked great the entire movie. The only time it looked off was when Joe was all CGI. Rick Baker did the special effects, and that's always a good thing because the man is a legend. Mighty Joe Young was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, but lost that year to the movie What Dreams May Come. This film just reminds me of how good effects were in the 90s. Films like Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, and Titanic were all visually amazing. Why? Because they were still mostly practical effects and real locations. CGI was still young and hadn't taken over yet. It was there to enhance the practical effects, instead now it's the go-to way of making movies. I'm sorry, but a CGI stormtrooper is never going to look better than an actual person in a suit. And CGI takes away from the magic of movies. A good practical effect is supposed to leave you scratching your head wondering how they pulled that off. With CGI, you know it's computers. It's dull and less creative. So after taking a look back on the remake of Mighty Joe Young, does it deserve the boot? I'd say no on this one. It's pretty good for what it is. Like the original, it bombed at the box office. It cost $90 million to make and made around $50 million. Critically, it did better than that damn Godzilla movie that came out the same year. It's a decent example of what a remake should be, a nice update on an old movie. An old movie that didn't even do that well financially. Nowadays, every big moneymaker is getting remade for the simple fact that it's a big moneymaker. We have to remake A Nightmare on Elm Street because the series has made hundreds of millions of dollars and there's already a fan base for it. If you're going to remake something, let it be something that actually failed the first time. Don't fix what isn't broken.
Assholes.
The simple synopsis of the movie is the same. Giant gorilla goes from Africa to LA, but everything else is different. Why he goes there is different. And what happens while he is there is different. And that's a good thing. It's close enough to being like the original, but refreshing at the same time. The movie even pulls on your heartstrings more. For that, the movie is spared, and if you've forgotten this movie or haven't seen it in a while, I suggest giving it a second watch. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Boots to Reboots, the place where most remakes come to die.
He takes out his poacher's noise maker.